A young couple sets out on the adventure of a lifetime, but only one of them comes back. A trail of deception.
From Panama to Costa Rica to Southern California.
A history of violence.
There were reports of incidents both ways from the island.
A gruesome discovery, and a family torn apart.
He slit the top of it open with his machete, and skull rolled out.
It was here among the sun-splashed beaches of Southern California where Yvonne Baldelli grew up.
She had one older sister and one older brother. She was the baby of the family at the time.
She was 14 when we got married. I just loved her. She was very special, and she was a very happy person.
But at nearly 40 years old, the passionate dog lover with the infectious smile seemed a bit lost, bouncing from job to job, unsure of what she really wanted out of life. Then, she met a strong 6'2" Midwestern man named Brian Brimager.
He served in the Marine Corps, and there are people who liked him. He had a gregarious personality. I think women found him attractive. Yvonne Baldelli certainly did.
But just how positive was that attraction?
She was obviously very smitten with him.
Almost to the detriment of anybody else in her life.
And there were more than a few little problems with that.
Mr. Brimager was married at the time and was in other relationships, but was seeing her.
How much Yvonne knew about Brian's wife or any other women when they met isn't completely certain. But at some point during their affair, she not only found out, she went public.
She wrote a letter to Brimager's then wife describing the relationship that Brimager had with her, that he had with another woman by the name of Kristen Werkhoven. So she was aware that Brimager was not being faithful to her.
And that should have been the end of Brian Brimager and Yvonne Baldelli. Instead, Brian eventually divorced, and over the next few years, he and Yvonne maintained an on-again, off-again relationship. Then suddenly, things were on in a very big way.
Whose idea was it for them to move to Panama?
Her words to me was that Brian came home and he says, I'm retiring. At that time, she had lost her job. He told her, forget about the job search, we're going to Panama.
And she sold everything she had here in California.
So you knew she meant business.
She was,
Oh, yeah.
she was serious.
She told me she was going to design clothes and sell them on the beach. She was very
She had a
happy.
plan.
Yes, she had a
She
plan.
had a plan, and she was so happy.
And so, with only a few sewing machines and Georgia May, the King Charles Spaniel she considered her child, Yvonne took Brian's hand all the way to the small expat community of Bocas del Toro, Panama.
They'd settled in fairly quickly to the island of Isla Canero. Brimager was playing the guitar at local bars. She was attempting to work.
But according to multiple witnesses, thanks in part to a never-ending supply of booze and coke, it soon became a paradise lost.
It wasn't long after they got to Panama when things really took a turn. And would you say the violence began to escalate?
Absolutely. The violence began to escalate almost immediately when they arrived in Panama.
What the landlord said is that every time they were together, she observed Miss Baldelli being jealous and trying to push and prod Mr. Brimager.
But Brian pushed right back, and then some.
We have multiple witnesses who have all corroborated and told us about the numerous times when Brian would punch Yvonne, when Brian would strangle Yvonne, when Brian would kick her. Her neighbor could hear it through the walls.
Did Yvonne ever reach out to anyone and say, I don't know what to do?
You know, Yvonne had multiple people on the island that did come to her. And her response wasn't to deny the violence, but was to describe it as something that she could handle.
But handle how? On the night of November 8th, just over a month after they first arrived, Yvonne and Brian got into a heated argument.
Do you believe Yvonne was a victim of domestic violence?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you believe Brian Brimager was a victim of domestic violence?
Absolutely.
Sometime during the fight, Brian turned his back, and Yvonne snapped.
Miss Baldelli took Brian's computer. They had 2 laptops at the time. Took the laptop and smashed it on him.
After that, the couple's neighbor heard Yvonne, quote, screaming bloody murder. A series of loud thuds, and then nothing at all. For 2 days, no sign of Yvonne. But then, both she and Brian appear in town, Yvonne concealing her face behind dark sunglasses.
There's photographs that she took from her own laptop of her left eye having a massive bruise.
As records would later show, Brian punched her in the face after she hit him with the laptop.
The laptop broke. That had an unintended consequence. The consequence is that they were now both checking their email on the same laptop. Ms. Baldelli had somebody install software on that laptop to get Mr. Brimager's email password.
And that's when she found out that the entire time Brian had been in Panama with her, he was emailing his other old flame, Kristen Workhoven. And not just that.
He was saying, I'll be back home to spend time with you and help raise our daughter. And of course, this is all without Yvonne Baldelli knowing about the fact that he even had a daughter.
Apparently, while Brian was married to his first wife and at the same time dating Yvonne, he had also fathered a secret child with Kristen.
Yvonne just had no idea.
She had no idea. She was blind to the fact that he was living a double life.
The date was November 26th. According to court records, Yvonne woke Brian up screaming about what she'd found.
She got very angry. They got into a fight. That fight escalated.
Then at some point during the day, Yvonne sat down at her computer to write a letter. A little over 2 weeks later, a plane touched down in San Diego. Only Brian stepped off.
Do people think, where's Yvonne?
They do.
When Yvonne Baldelli moved to Panama with her boyfriend Brian, she thought it was to start a new life together. But apparently, they weren't both on the same page. And when a return flight touched down in San Diego just a few months later, they weren't both on that either.
He flies back to the United States, and he eventually goes and gets his truck.
He has to pick up his truck.
That's right, from Yvonne's sister, Michelle Valenzuela.
Before Brian and Yvonne left, Brian parked a truck full of his things at Yvonne's sister's house. And if not for that pickup, who knows where this story might have gone.
So he has to face the sister.
He does. And she asks, Brian, where's my sister?
In fact, no one in Yvonne's family had heard from her in weeks. Not since Yvonne found out Brian had been emailing a woman named Kristen Workhoven, the mother of a child Yvonne didn't even know Brian had.
It was unusual that when Brian came back, that Michelle had not heard from her for over 3 weeks, and that concerned her.
But was everyone just making a big fuss over nothing?
What Brian told people was that she had found out on his computer that he had a daughter with Kristen Workhoven, and that she had become angry about this information and had decided to leave with another man to Costa Rica.
And as it turns out, just a few days after that big November 26th fight, Yvonne and Brian's Panamanian landlord received an email from Yvonne's address confirming as much. It read, "Hey Nene, Brian is a lying, cheating expletive, and I just couldn't stand dealing with it anymore. I'm in Costa Rica for a while with a guy I met at one of Brian's gigs when we first moved here. We've been talking off and on since then, and it's great to be spending time with someone who can be considered a gentleman."
Michelle is immediately suspicious.
In fact, Michelle told Brian, "I want to go to the police and report her missing."
And what did he say?
He said, "Why don't you just wait on that? Let me try to reach out to her, contact her by email, and see if she'll get in touch."
And not long after that, it seemed she did. In the email, Yvonne tells Michelle she's alive and well and should be home in a few weeks for a big family reunion. It was 2 days after Christmas when Michelle sent her reply. "So glad you responded. Didn't want to pry or bug, but I was worried. Wanted to make sure you weren't kidnapped and someone pretending it was you, haha." After that, the emails from Yvonne stopped, despite repeated, desperate pleas from her family to get in touch.
I said, whatever you need, we just need you to be okay, and we're not going to judge you. Just contact us. We just need to know you're okay.
And then came time for that big family reunion, the one Yvonne said she would try to attend.
January 12th comes around. The family gathering is there. Yvonne doesn't show up.
My heart drops.
So you knew that was sort of the last stop in all of this.
Right.
If she doesn't show up for this family gathering, then it's going to be all hands on deck.
Right.
Almost immediately, Yvonne's sister starts her own investigation.
She enlists the help of a tech-savvy relative who then starts to look at the origin of where the emails from Yvonne's account were coming from.
Michelle found out that the emails had come from
California.
Southern California.
Even more specific,
The emails were actually coming from where Brian Brimager was living.
and perhaps the most suspicious part of all, who Brian was living with. The woman he'd been emailing in Panama, the mother of his secret child, and most shocking to Yvonne's family, his brand new bride, Kristen Workhoven.
So Brian comes back to the United States, gets engaged to Kristen
Just within days, yes.
within days.
Within 2 days.
Within 2 days, he's engaged.
He's engaged, and he was married that same month.
Somebody forwarded me the registry from his new wife. I screamed. I screamed hysterically in the house. My husband got up. I'm saying, look at this, look at this, look at this.
Were you enraged?
I was angry.
And Michelle went to the local sheriff's office and actually filed a missing persons report.
Yeah, actually, she wasn't going to report her missing. She was going to report a murder because she had felt that that's what had happened, that she was murdered.
They look like two people who have been in love their whole lives. You'd never know that just a few weeks before these wedding photos were taken, the groom, Brian Brimager, was living in Panama with another woman. A woman now missing, and depending on who you asked, presumed murdered.
The last time that she was seen alive was when a local saw them going towards a boat dock, and they were fighting, and Brimager was dragging her by the arm back to the boat.
It was shortly after she discovered Brian's secret correspondence with Kristen. But Brian said it was actually Yvonne who left him for someone else, ran off to Costa Rica with some mystery man. Curiously, Yvonne's bank card had been used at a Costa Rican ATM around the same time.
Something was definitely wrong because not only was she missing, but who else was missing with her?
Her dog. She couldn't have kids, so that was her baby.
She would have never left her
her.
dog.
So, with all the fake emails Brian sent posing as Yvonne in hand, Yvonne's sister, Michelle, filed a report with authorities, and Brian was brought in for questioning.
He did sit and agree to speak with the FBI when it was still mostly a missing persons investigation.
But he told them the same Costa Rican romance he told everyone else.
What did you do?
I called the Costa Rican embassy to see if she really went to Costa Rica. And she said nobody with that passport ever entered the country.
Even more troubling?
When I called the American embassy in Panama, they said that she never left Panama. You know, I said, we gotta do something.
So, working in conjunction with American and Panamanian authorities, Yvonne's family flew to Bocas del Toro to start their own search.
We, by ourselves quietly, walked all around the island as far as we could go, and then went back the other way as far as we could go, and we would do that every day. And we would look everywhere.
Grueling work for anyone, let alone Yvonne's aging parents.
There hadn't been any proof she had been murdered, and certainly no proof that she had been murdered by Brimager.
What authorities did have was a growing mountain of circumstantial evidence. For one, those fake emails.
He was flat out asked, did you impersonate Yvonne?
Yes,
And he said no.
that's right.
In addition to that, there were upsetting reports out of Panama of Brian suddenly flush with cash after Yvonne's disappearance, buying everyone in the bar drinks while toasting her name. And as for those ATM withdrawals tying Yvonne to Costa Rica, turns out when Brian left Panama to come back to the States, he made one little stop along the way.
He purposefully took a trip to Costa Rica to bolster his story, to withdraw money from Yvonne's account to make it look like she had been in Costa Rica.
But of all the damning clues, there was one that stood out as particularly disturbing. Apparently, Yvonne wasn't all Brian left behind on the island.
Mr. Brimager had brought a machete down to Panama with him. Then he had given the machete in exchange for a debt that he owed to a local Panamanian person that was there on the island.
That person then put the machete up for sale on a local website.
And Mr. Brimager happened to have seen that it was up for sale. And he logged into that site and he posted a comment saying, "Don't worry, that machete was mine. I brought it from the United States. It's barely been used. I only used it to dismember one stripper."
A terrible joke or something more? Police bring the machete to the States for testing, but it comes back clean. And after over a year of searching for Yvonne in Panama, the family comes back with little more than a collection of traumatic moments like this.
We get to a shallow area, and there were like these garbage bags that were torn. And there were bones all over.
They would later turn out to be animal bones. But Yvonne's parents were forced to leave the island before getting confirmation.
And when we had to leave the island, and when we had to leave the country, I could not live with myself thinking that I left her behind and that maybe those are her bones.
She had a nervous breakdown and had to be hospitalized. Going through all that and not being able to bring Yvonne back was just very devastating.
At this point, Yvonne's family is sacrificing so much time, money, energy, searching for their loved one. Brian Brimager is back here in San Diego doing what?
He's living the life of Riley. He is going to school, he's golfing. Kristen and Brian then had another kid.
And through it all, Brian maintained his same old story. One that was rapidly unraveling.
He denied doing anything other than just knowing she had ran off with another man. Once we were able to review the contents of his computer and interview him, it became very clear to us that he was the one that was involved.
So at first, he's charged and arrested. Where is he taken down?
He was arrested in his home in Carlsbad, California, which is actually the home of Kristen Werkhoven.
The woman Brian married right after coming back from Panama without Yvonne.
Initially, he was charged with obstruction of justice and making false statements to federal officers. When he was interviewed, he lied about having Yvonne's computer, lied about beating Yvonne, lied about impersonating her through emails. He lied about multiple things with the intent to obstruct justice.
It wasn't the charge Yvonne's family was hoping for, but at the very least, Brian was off the streets. Still, even when confronted with his own lies, Brian continued to deny having anything to do with Yvonne's disappearance. But then, roughly 1 month after his arrest, breaking news out of Panama.
There was a Panamanian man who lived out in the middle of this jungle, and he was building a trail from his hut out to the coast. And he was chopping away with his machete, and he came across a military-style duffel bag. He slit the top of it open with his machete, and Yvonne's skull rolled out in front of him.
Are all of the body parts there?
No, they were not able to find an entire skeleton.
What was that night like for you?
Because they didn't find all her remains.
That was hard.
That was hard to know that there was pieces of her missing.
Large, uniformed cuts in many of the bones tell at least part of the gory tale.
It's just very hard to think that she was chopped up.
But even with Yvonne's remains found, Brian remained silent while the prosecution worked with Yvonne's family to build its case. Unfortunately for the prosecution's star witness, time was running out.
You know, this is one of the most tragic parts of this case. Yvonne's sister, Michelle Valenzuela, was diagnosed with breast cancer. During the time that she was so desperately trying to find her sister and so desperately trying to find justice for her sister, she wasn't taking proper care of herself. She was so focused on her sister that she missed a lump in her breast.
By the time her sister's body was finally found, the cancer had metastasized to Michelle's brain.
They weren't certain how much longer she would be available and coherent, and so we sought an emergency deposition of a potential witness because we didn't believe that she would be able to make it all the way to trial.
Good afternoon, Ms. Valenzuela.
Good afternoon.
How are you?
I'm fine.
For as long as she could,
This is my sister, Yvonne Baldelli.
Michelle sat across the table from the man she knew killed her sister and set her peace.
Since dropping her off at the airport with the defendant, did you ever see your sister again?
No.
Brian said nothing.
I was saying that he murdered my sister.
After the deposition, we wheeled her back to the hotel room. She asked how she did. We told her she did great. And she went to sleep, and she never regained consciousness again.
You know, you couldn't have had a better sister than Michelle.
She's a champion.
She is a champion.
To use the last moments of her life to sit down and to give everything she could.
It was one of the strongest demonstrations of strength and fortitude that I've ever seen. Mr. Brimager really took both of their daughters.
But still, Brian copped to nothing. Something that was about to become much harder to do because of one key piece of evidence.
That machete was found.
It was.
Even after his ex-girlfriend's body was found macheted in the jungle, after he sat across from her dying sister during her last moments on Earth, even with all the evidence pointing right back at him, Brian Brimager still denied having anything to do with Yvonne Baldelli's murder. But that was about to become much harder to do.
Over a year after it had originally been tested and they had found no blood, we were examining the machete in preparation for trial. And we found that the handle could be removed. They removed the handle and found that there was blood under the handle, the same DNA as Yvonne Baldelli.
When confronted with that news, Brian Brimager sat down with his lawyers and finally started talking.
We were ready to go to trial, and he pled guilty approximately 1 month before trial.
It started just as Brian said it had so many years before.
Around the time of her death, that the victim had logged on to his account and had found out that Mr. Brimager had another relationship with Kristen Werkhoven, had a child.
Brian's defense claims that a violent, day-long fight ensued, culminating in Yvonne pulling a knife. Brian fought back, beating Yvonne before getting hold of the knife and using it to fatally stab her in the back. Then things really got gruesome.
He said that after he had stabbed her in the back, he knew that he needed to move her and bury her in the jungle. And in order to do that, he needed to get her to be small enough to fit in a backpack.
And so, in his own words, Brian Brimager dragged his girlfriend into the bathroom and used his machete to dismember her body. Then, to make it look like she really did just run off with all her things, he killed her dog.
Were the dog's remains ever found?
No, they were not.
But what really started that final fight? Was there a deeper motive? Evidence found on Yvonne's computer begged the question.
She had drafted a letter entitled Werkhoven, the name of Kristen Werkhoven. We believe that she intended to send that letter and intended to make sure that Brian's plans to return and live with Kristen and raise his daughter weren't going to happen. And he wasn't going to let her talk. So he killed her.
The U.S. Attorney's Office does believe the motive is that he wanted to silence her.
I don't think that holds water.
You don't?
I don't. I think this was a fight that escalated, and then he had to figure out what to do. I think it was a huge mistake. He found himself in that moment in Panama, not knowing what to do, and having to make terrible decisions.
But if it really was all just a heat-of-the-moment situation, what about Brian's behavior after he got off the island?
Probably the most heinous and cruel acts he committed were what he put that family through in making them believe that Yvonne was still alive, giving them false hope she was still alive.
And then there was that Facebook comment about using his machete to, quote, dismember one stripper.
Is there any response for that?
What he did was in terrible taste. But it wasn't to denigrate her memory or because he's cold-blooded. It was to make everybody look away from him. It was a deflection. Brian, I think, remains remorseful, remains repentant.
Yvonne's parents have strong opinions about what Brian can do with his remorse.
There's no way I believe that he's sorry.
In the end, Brian was sentenced to 26 years in federal prison, which means no chance of parole.
May 25th was the sentencing. May 28th, we were able to take Yvonne back to San Diego, close to where her home was, and give her a send-off that was dignified. That was something worthy of Yvonne.
Justice has been served for Yvonne's killer. But what about the woman who, even to this day, continues to stand by his side?
The beginning of when some people are making comments about his wife, my husband said, you know, she's a victim like Yvonne was a victim. Let's be patient. But now, after she knows what Yvonne suffered, he broke her nose, broke her jaw, broke her teeth, stabbed her over and over and over again, and chopped her up in little pieces and threw her in a swamp. And she's supporting the man that destroyed Yvonne. I'm sorry, I don't have any understanding for her.
And we wanted to help Yvonne's parents find that understanding. So we sent our own Jason Matera to Kristen's home to try and get some answers.
Let's see what Kristen has to say for herself. Does she still support her husband after what he pleaded guilty to? Someone's coming. Jason Matera with Crime Watch Daily. Is Kristen here? Can you open the door? Is Kristen your daughter? Is there a Kristen that lives here? Jason Matera with Crime Watch Daily. We're doing a story about Kristen's husband's conviction, Brian. She doesn't live here. Where does she live? Do you know her, miss?
The woman behind the door refuses to open up, but we had to try one more time to get Kristen's side of the story.
Just had a question on whether Kristen still stands by Brian or not. Brian's attorney says that she still supports him. Odd, considering what he's convicted of.
After several more minutes of knocking, we're forced to leave without the answers we came for. Repeated calls to Kristen Workhoven by our producers have also gone unanswered. So for now, this is where we're left. 2 daughters lost, a family fractured, but not broken.
We pray and we look forward to one day seeing them again, to hug them again and tell them how much we love them and how much we miss them. And that's our hope.